Hi, I'm Martin Kane. Today I'm going to be reviewing two articles regarding information technology, and the issues in these articles will look at ethics and teaching social responsibility in information technology. Very good. The first article I'm reviewing today is called Educational Technology along with the Uncritical Mass versus Ethics. Now, the author in this article examines that new media access in schools has always been rising, just as new methods to efficiently teach and learn have gradually been invented. This implies that as technology advances, we also need to keep up with that and teach ethics and ways to be socially responsible when using new technology. You can further validate what the author has stated in this article by looking at the trends of technology recently. Now, the HSC syllabus was written in 2009. However, the iPad, the very first model, came out in 2010. Technologies like this have basically changed the way lessons are taught and cater to different learning styles of students. So as technology advances and we have more access to different things, we also need to teach students how to be socially responsible and use ethical values. The author of this article also goes on to further point out that since the early year 2000, the social media landscape has changed. Social media was actually introduced and is now becoming more rampant among youth and all levels of society today. We need to teach students how to be ethical and responsible citizens within these landscapes. Oh, you just caught me downloading the new Avengers movie. That's an example of something not to say in front of students. As teachers, we need to lead by example. We need to be role models for our students, and the behaviour taught throughout IT needs to be ethical and socially responsible. The author goes on to state that as we introduce students to new technology, we need to show them the risks of using that technology. So in university and in both school, for example, Dropbox, a file sharing platform, has become more common. With that file sharing platform, we need to make students aware that they can be breaching intellectual property. To apply this to the Australian curriculum, students in the HSC are required to build communication systems and information systems. We need to make sure that students are using appropriate technology that doesn't break intellectual property laws. Students need to make sure that these technologies have been acquired legally. As you've probably seen in the news with the recent Dallas Buyers Club case, the intellectual property law area is constantly changing. Students need to be aware of the risks that they are taking if they do download anything illegal. The rise of Wikipedia has basically caused many sites and sources for students to use, but these sites and sources may lack validity. In other words, there's a loss of quality if students were to use them. Intellectual property and copyright has now essentially become a major issue in teaching information technology. The way I would get students in this situation to learn about ethical responsibilities and issues would be through a formative assessment task. For example, the students have to research a recent case or issue affecting intellectual property. This will teach students ethics as they have to research a certain case and gather information from that case and present it to the class. By doing this case, students can learn to act ethically, and they can also learn that acting unethically can have unforeseen consequences. 3 years ago, downloading movies was okay. Today, if you look at the most recent Dallas Buyers Club case, people are getting tracked down a few years later after they've committed a crime and are being potentially prosecuted by the courts. These tasks and learning activities fit in with the curriculum. For example, page 38 requires students to discuss the social and ethical issues that have arisen from the use of the internet. Whilst elsewhere in the syllabus, students are required to identify and apply issues of ownership, accuracy, and data quality. Students should not only look at the ethics of their own actions,
but also the ethics of other people. This is a graphical representation of a summary of the first article. It illustrates that funding agencies, hardware and software vendors, policymakers, educational researchers and evaluators, instructional designers, and institution administrators all have a stake in the different areas of IT and education. The authors go on to state that the personal risks and lack of control over current educational media are more extreme than before, owing to the ability they provide to infiltrate the personal data, lives, and identities of individuals. As teachers, we need to recognize this and make our students aware of this as well. As teachers, we also need to factor this in when we're making decisions of what technology to use in the course. This is an aspect of teaching ethics in ICT.
Oh, hello again. The second article I'm reviewing today is called Information Technology in Schools, Managing the Legal and Ethical Implications. Now, while this article is over 10 years old, a lot of the same implications and concerns apply to the present. The author states that in schools it is important to differentiate between technologies used and designed for education and for promotional purposes. We need to differentiate the two. There is an issue with commercial products in that in a school they may contain advertising material and other promotional materials that aren't appropriate for students. These can be inappropriate for a learning environment, and students need to understand the implications and ethical implications of using such technologies. The author advocates using an acceptable use policy amongst students. This can teach ethics in ICT as you can align the policy with the values of the school, for example if it's a Christian school, or it can align with other value systems. A strategy to teach students this would be through netiquette, which is how to behave online. This is becoming increasingly important today as students use social media and other modes of communication through IT. In my opinion, a way to teach using the acceptable use policy amongst students, which will also teach ethics, is to divide the class up into pairs. Each pair has to discuss why each dot point in the acceptable use policy exists. Each group then has to report back to the class and give a mini presentation discussing these aspects. To incorporate other learning styles, we could get students to create a poster. Now these posters can relate to the acceptable use policy in the school, a certain issue in it, or it can relate to a current news story or trend regarding ethics in ICT. The author concludes her article by stating that teachers have a duty of care regarding the materials that students access during school hours. In other words, in teaching ethical responsibilities to students is important for them, but it's also important for us as teachers. In doing this assignment, I've learnt that focusing on ethics for just a unit is not sufficient. We need to embed ethical considerations into the content throughout the course and also revisit it numerous times. Ethics as a topic needs reinforcement as students can potentially blur the lines between what is acceptable at home and what is acceptable at school in regards to using computers. Also, we need to keep revisiting ethics as the landscape I've mentioned earlier is constantly changing. This concludes my presentation on the articles by Adireza and Marty. Their article, Educational Technology along with the Uncritical Mass versus Ethics, has taught me a lot regarding ethical issues in information technology. The second article by Lynn Arnold called Information Technology in Schools, Managing the Legal and Ethical Implications, has also taught me other issues regarding ethics, more to do with the use of an acceptable use policy. Well, that's the end of my presentation. I'm Martin Kane. See you in the classroom.